Welcome. Today we're going to take a look at SQL instances, and this isn't going to be a technical discussion. We're just going to talk about what is a SQL instance and try to make a connection between the server, the service, application, terminology. From a developer's point of view, the SQL instance is just the name they use in their web config to connect to the database. Their connection string is going to have a server/instance name. And this is about that instance name. So let's take a look at a single server that we install multiple instances on and how the application connects to it from a less technical viewpoint. So here's your server. It doesn't have anything installed on it. It's just let's just say it's a Windows server. VM somewhere in Florida with an IP address of 192.168.5.12, and what we're going to do is we're going to install a SQL service on here and start putting databases on there. That SQL service is going to encompass all of the functionality, everything that a SQL server does, the settings, the configuration, all of that's going to be kind of wrapped up into that service. And because we're going to install more than one on the same server, we need to separate them in some way. Now in this example, we're installing an instance and we're going to call it WSQL01. If you were to look at the services, for example on my VM, you would see what actually gets installed is a service called SQL Server, and then in parentheses it has the instance name WSQL01. I use the same names to keep things simple here. So when we install a second and a third one, the same thing happens. We have an 02 and an 03. So since we're installing stuff, we're going to put another 02 and an 03 on this same server. At this point, we have 3 SQL Server instances installed. They're all exactly the same. None of them have been configured, so they're exactly the same other than the instance name. If we go back to our services, you'll see that the SQL Server service is not the only one that gets installed. You'll see a SQL Server agent that's specific to that SQL Server instance, and you'll also see a SQL Server CEIP. Continuing with this diagram, we bring in the application. Now the application is on another machine and it has this name and instance name in order to connect. So the first thing it does is it looks for the server on the network to see if it exists, and if it's found, the application responds and it says, I have this instance name where my database is supposed to be. That's going to specify WSQL02 in this example, and the connection is made because 02 does exist. Then it handles authentication and checks to make sure that the database they're looking for does exist. This is generally how the instances are installed and how they exist on the server, how the application looks for them. The reason you separate these, the reason you have 3 instances instead of just one, the resources on the server can be shared among multiple instances. So you have a larger machine that can host, in this example, 3 separate SQL instances. Now these don't need to be production instances. They could be a development, a test, a QA. Many of those environments do not use resources on the server as heavily as production does. So installing multiple instances and sharing connections, you can add multiple databases for each one of these instances. 01 could have 10 databases, 02 could have 5, 03 could have 20. This way you pay for the licensing for the single server. You have 3 separate instances to work with, and the databases are different on each one. And I hope that this high-level explanation of the SQL instances, how they work, a little bit of how they're installed service-wise, and some of the purpose of using instances on a single machine has helped you understand it better. Please leave your comments, like, and subscribe below. Thanks a lot.